Okay, so the Dune movies aren't exactly hard sci-fi, but science and technology play a huge role in Frank Herbert's universe, so you might be forgiven for wondering just how grounded in reality are his concepts. Early in Dune Part 1, we get to see a brief hand-to-hand fight sequence between Paul Atreides and Gurney Halleck, in which both characters activate a shield that protects the wearer from certain kinds of damage. David Lynch's 1984 adaptation of Dune also has a go at depicting these shields, but, well, let's just say they don't look quite as slick.
Now, guard yourself from truth.
But while these shields allow for some pretty cool imagery from a filmmaking standpoint, scientifically, they probably wouldn't work. In-universe personal shields are explained by something called the Holtzman effect, which Frank Herbert himself described in the glossary of Dune as the negative repelling effect of a shield generator. Of course, this effect isn't a real thing. It's just a fun bit of sci-fi world building. That said, some researchers have tried to come up with similar kinds of force shields. In an interview with the BBC, physics professor Jim Al-Khalili suggested creating shields using electromagnetic force. Hypothetically, by creating a positive charge on an approaching projectile, it could be deflected by an electric or magnetic field. Meanwhile, research scientist Dr. Kevin Grazier told The Debrief that superheated plasma could be used to instantly vaporize incoming objects, essentially forming a type of shield, though one that would function pretty differently to those we see in Dune. Sadly though, these ideas are just that. Even if anyone does come up with technology like this, it probably won't happen for a very, very long time. One of the most memorable designs in the Dune movies is that of the Ornithopter. These beautiful aircraft look almost fantastical in flight, appearing more like giant dragonflies than aircraft. This isn't a departure from the books either, as Herbert referred to ornithopters as being insect-like in shape. And here's the thing. These vehicles actually have some basis in reality. Aircraft like this are actually called ornithopters, as this term applies to any craft that propels itself by flapping wings in the same manner as a bird. The concept of the ornithopter has been around for centuries, dating back to at least the work of Leonardo da Vinci, if not further. Experiments were conducted throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries as scientists and early aviators tried to find a way to get them to work. Unfortunately, they never did, and the few ornithopters that got in the air didn't stay there for very long. In the end, engineers figured out that flight could be better achieved by employing the fixed-wing designs that are still in use today. Nevertheless, scientists have since found one use for ornithopters. In 2012, researchers at the University of Illinois developed a robot ornithopter capable of autonomous flight. Assistant Professor Soon-Jo Chung told Engadget, "Bats can fly with damaged wings. They are so agile and highly maneuverable. They can make rapid 180-degree turns autonomously, and they can fly indoors without colliding with obstacles. These qualities are desirable for small aircraft that could be used in surveillance, particularly in urban settings where obstacles hamper movement and satellite control is blocked." If there's one thing everyone knows about Arrakis, it's that it's really, really hot. Covered in unforgiving deserts, the planet known as Dune has necessitated the creation of specific technology just for people to survive there, the Stillsuit. This form of clothing is able to cool the wearer and recycle their sweat, turning it into drinkable water, and it's all powered by natural movements like breathing.
In good working order, your suit won't lose more than a thimbleful of water a day.
Sadly, this technology is more science fantasy than science fiction. The biggest problem is sweat. The process of sweating is more than just a gross human adaptation. It's actually the body's natural cooling method, as the body cools by turning that sweat into vapor. In stillsuits, if that sweat is taken directly from the skin, the body wouldn't actually cool down, it'd just dry off, increasing the risk of heat stroke in the wearer. Even if it's assumed that stillsuits allow sweat to turn into vapor, there are still a few problems. That vapor would need to be condensed, or else the air inside the suit would become too humid for any more sweat to vaporize. You could then argue that the sweat is condensed back into drinking water, but condensation would require a whole lot of extra energy in order to work. And to do that, we're going to need a bit more explanation than breathing makes it go. Baron Harkonnen makes quite the impression in Dune Part 1.
My Arrakis. My Dune.
In the movies, Baron is usually depicted levitating or seated in a floating chair. In the books, Frank Herbert offers an explanation for this. The Baron is so overweight that he requires the use of a suspensor suit. The glossary in the Dune novel explains that suspensors utilize a Holtzman field, which is related to the Holtzman effect that underpins much of the other fictitious technology in Herbert's universe. Apparently, they work by nullifying the gravity within a certain area. Of course, pretty much everything in Dune pertaining to the Holtzman effect is made up, even if it is internally consistent. So the only thing we can do here is look for a close equivalent. equivalent. At the moment, levitation is largely achieved through the manipulation of magnetic fields. Quantum magnetic levitation in particular functions due to the Meissner effect, in which materials can be cooled to the point that they act like superconductors, repelling any magnets placed above them. The problem is, of course, that this kind of setup needs to be really cold in order to work. Liquid nitrogen levels of cold, in fact. And even these systems have problems of their own, in that they require external power sources to function. If they could be turned into gadgets, current technology just wouldn't allow for users to float anywhere at any time under almost any circumstance. But hey, that's the magic of science fiction. No image is more iconic in the Dune universe than the bright, vivid blue eyes of the Fremen. The so-called Eyes of Ibad are associated with spice, the coveted substance that drives much of the conflict in the story. Prolonged exposure to spice causes a change in eye color, and this is exactly what happens to both Paul and Jessica Atreides over the course of Dune. Here's a question though. In this spiceless world in which we live, is it possible to undergo such a dramatic change in eye color? And the answer is, not really. Very generally speaking, it is possible for eye colors to change. The use of medications such as glaucoma eye drops or eyelash growth serums have been noted to cause changes to the colors of users' irises. That said, this effect is mostly seen in the case of lighter eyes, which then can turn darker, sometimes to a shade of brown. There's also a medical condition called arcus senilis, in which a light blue ring can form around the edge of the cornea. The discoloration comes from a buildup of cholesterol and is generally a natural result of aging. In a way, this isn't entirely different to what happens to spice users in Dune, but the physiology behind it is totally different. It's no understatement to say that pretty much all of Dune revolves around spice. This substance drives the political tension found throughout the books and movies, as David Lynch's adaptation so succinctly puts it.
He who controls the spice controls the universe.
In The Science of Dune, Carol Hart explains that spice serves many different purposes to many different people. The Guild navigators require it to safely pilot the spaceships that cross between planets. The Bene Gesserit use it in their rituals to commune with previous Reverend Mothers. The Fremen consume it as a normal part of their daily diet. Meanwhile, noble families across the Imperium take it recreationally, experiencing some level of increased life expectancy as a result. That's a lot for a single substance to do, and obviously not all of those effects have real-world analogs. There is certainly no miracle drug that guarantees increased life expectancy, and we probably don't need to tell you that no substance on Earth allows you to see into the future. That said, Hart does point out that some of the other effects of spice resemble those of hallucinogenic substances such as LSD. Just don't expect to see NASA astronauts tripping in the cockpit anytime soon. Sandworms are the most dangerous presence in the vast deserts of Arrakis, unless you're one of the Fremen, in which case they're basically just giant kick-ass buses. So what can science tell us about these giant creatures? Well, biologically speaking, they're almost nothing like the worms you'd find on Earth. The problem is in the way that they move. In Dune, the sandworms are typically shown rushing forward at blinding speeds and with little deformation to their bodies. But the worms that you'd find in your garden can't move like that. They have pockets full of liquid that they can manipulate in a wave-like fashion, essentially scooting forward along the ground. And while snakes and worms share some similarities in their movements, the sandworms don't even move like snakes, which typically slither side to side in order to propel themselves forward. The closest analog that scientists can think of are a very specific group of animals known as amphisbaenians, or worm lizards. These animals utilize something called rectilinear locomotion, in which the skeleton slides around inside of the skin, allowing them to move without sliding or scooting. Amphisbaenians even burrow underground, much like the sandworms, although they can't do so at the incredible speeds seen in the movie. The Dune movies offer a few vague references to the way space travel works in Frank Herbert's universe. Early in Part 1, lip service is paid to the navigators of the Spacing Guild, who use spice to plot courses through space on their interstellar journeys.
We're witnessed by members of the Imperial Court, representatives of the Spacing Guild, and a sister of the Bene Gesserit.
Little more is said aside from that though, and all we actually see of them are their highliners. The plot of Dune Messiah suggests we should get a little more from the Guild in Dune Part 3, but for now, Denis Villeneuve's movies have been pretty lacking when it comes to the mechanics of travel in the Imperium. Turning to the novels, it becomes clear that Herbert's vision of space travel is pretty wild. In Dune, ships travel great distances instantaneously by folding space, which is made possible by, you guessed it, the Holtzman effect. Practically, This means that the Guild's highliners are capable of faster than light travel. Okay, so the science. For one thing, physics dictates that no object can travel faster than the calculated speed of light, which effectively acts as a kind of universal speed limit. Only massless objects can move that fast. A spaceship definitely can't. And even the idea of folding space is a little shaky. Technically speaking, the theoretical concept of wormholes seem to align with the space folding seen in Dune. They act as a bridge between two different points in space-time, and they're not ruled out by the general theory of relativity. But there's a catch. Objects such as spaceships probably wouldn't be able to move through them all too readily, meaning that they couldn't be used for travel, even in theory. Spice is not just useful for space travel in Dune, it's vital. Since the Spacing Guild's navigators use it to plot safe paths through the stars, interstellar travel wouldn't be possible without it. The novels explain that the most dangerous aspect of folding space is the likelihood of materializing inside of a solid object, which can easily happen if a navigator isn't on board to guide a ship. But how likely is it that a ship moving instantly through space would actually materialize inside of a planet or some other kind of celestial body? Statistically speaking, it's probably not that high. Space is pretty empty on the whole. If you were to evenly spread out all matter in existence, the universe would have a density of only about 6 hydrogen atoms per cubic meter. Of course, matter isn't spread out evenly, but things are still pretty far apart, even in more densely populated areas of the universe. All this is to say that if we do ever get around to building that drug-addled, war-torn spacefaring Imperium, we probably don't have to worry too much about blipping ourselves into the heart of a star. Ain't that neat?